it's such a great opportunity to conduct this interview with you. And so I want to start off. How are you doing today? What's been going on?
I feel like that's the hardest question of all, since 2020 is like, how are you? Because every moment it changes.
Right.
Today I'm doing good. It's been really fun to see Jupiter's Legacy that just came out is like #1 globally on Netflix. And it's just so fun to see the fans' reactions to all the twists and turns that are happening. So I'm obsessively checking Twitter every day.
Yeah. So let me tell you something. So you have just kind of just read my mind in a sense virtually, because I was just about to ask you about Netflix Jupiter's Legacy. And so how has that been? Tell us a little bit about that series.
Yeah, it's based on Mark Millar's comic book. He did like Kingsman, Kick-Ass, Hutch, a bunch of amazing, amazing novels, graphic novels. And so this is Netflix bought Miller World, and they made his comic book into a live action adaptation. And it's about this group of superheroes who get their powers in the 1920s, contrasted with the modern day legacy that they're leaving to their kids. And it's like this really great commentary on traditional values versus the modern world and how much things are changing. I know it's like such a cliche quote to say all the time, but it does feel like the world is so, America in particular, so drastically different than the idealistic values we held, almost 100 years ago. And that is obviously looked at with like rose colored glasses, because I would say indefinitely today we're trying to move towards better values all the time. But the comic book, I was so happy I didn't read the comic book till after I booked the role, because I loved the comics so much that I was afraid if I had read it beforehand, I would have totally messed up my audition.
Wow. So how, if any, does the character remind you of your own family history in any kind of way?
So Raikou, I mean, hopefully I can spoil it because it's out now
Sure, go
for
for it.
but Raikou was sort of abandoned by her father. So she's like sort of an illegitimate child, happened out of wedlock. Her dad kind of doesn't give a shit about her. My dad will hate it if I say I find this a little relatable, because it's not like he's abandoned me physically, just emotionally a little bit. But I feel like Raikou is trying so hard not to feel like any praise from her father matters to her, when very clearly it does, and just like constantly striving to be as good as her father, to be looked upon and respected from her father. And so I am someone who's very motivated by my dad's praise, so I that's relatable for sure.
That's pretty cool. And then we know that you wear so many hats as far as acting, YouTubing, music. And like I said, the list can go on. Usually they say like people are a triple threat, but you got more than that. You got more than that. And so, which one are you more passionate about?
I think writing and acting are my two biggest loves. I think as an actor on set, you just get to have so much fun. It's all about play. It's about community. It feels like summer camp. Writing, you're alone, usually, unless you're in a room. You're just like having an adventure in your head. It's about problem solving. It's about figuring out story. And I think those two things get me into flow state and make me feel more joy than anything else.
And that's so important, to feel joy with whatever you're doing. I feel like so many times there have been people that just do it, just to get paid, or just to, you know, spare time, oh, I can do that. But,
Yeah.
just to have something that you're so passionate about, that you really enjoy doing, that's top tier to me. That's
Yeah.
top tier. And you can probably never get that time back. Like, time is so important. And I have to learn that, especially as we had so much time with ourselves during the pandemic, just sitting at home, and you had too much time. It was just too much time for us.
I know, but it's also weird. Like, I don't know if you're getting into this phase of your pandemic, but all these people who like you see once every 6 months are coming out of the woodwork to be like, let's catch up, let's get coffee, let's get a drink. And I'm like, I don't want to. Like, I don't want people in my life who you only see once every 6 months to just like recite what your career is or your accomplishments are. So I do feel like the pandemic has kind of given me the real value of time back and made me like be more boundaried with who I want to let in.
That is important, because I feel like we crossed boundaries. We were just letting
Yeah.
anybody in, whether they were toxic, healthy. We just let anybody in our space. And to really understand, when you're by yourself, and you have time to like self-reflect, that is so dope to me. Like,
Yeah.
you have to figure out who the heck you are. Just to figure that out, because you can never, have enough time with yourself. I'm all for taking myself on a date, going
Yes.
to drink with myself. I'm all for it. So, you know, whoever I'm
I
with,
agree.
you better get with the vibe. Get with
Yeah, you're your own best partner. I was like in the pandemic, like, wow, I'm funny. I am cracking myself up every day.
right. If nobody else laughs at your jokes, laugh
Yeah.
at your own jokes.
What
Period.
did I just
Period.
said?
Period. And so, moving right along with the interview, I know that we are in a season where, there's so much racial discrimination happening. We have to focus on our mental health. I think that's another thing the pandemic did. It made us channel in like who we really are, but also focusing like, am I okay? How am I
Yeah.
doing today? Did I eat today? Like, figuring out what's really going on deep down inside. And so, how are you using your voice, in these so many these so many hats that you wear? I don't have to go down the list, but how are you using your voice to help AAPI people of color, who have experienced this racial discrimination, whether it's um, gender equality or bullying? How are you using your voice and your platform to do those things?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been someone who is very conscious of on my own sets, like anywhere where I have the power and control to make sure that there's adequate representation. I always try to make sure, like, are there enough women on set in positions that normally go to men? Like, am I actively looking at hiring more, LGBTQ or POC, and making sure that I have diverse voices surrounding me? But I mean, as of late, I think it's felt so powerless and hopeless to deal with, first the BLM movement that was happening, and then now the mass shootings against AAPI and the violence against AAPI. It's been really disheartening and discouraging to see what 4 years of having a bigot in office has really done to this country, and the ugliness that it's brought out. And I don't know, I got really dark there for a second, where I was like, is anything getting better? Like, is all of this like fight to be more inclusive and fight for accountability and fight for justice even working? I'm sure we all got pretty dark there for a second, but now what I'm trying to do is just to not get a mass shooting today and brush it off, just to try to still, have that moment of empathy, because I feel like we get assaulted every day with so much news stimulation about violence, about racially motivated violence, that it's really hard not to get compassion fatigued. So in addition to like my efforts of making sure to be inclusive of voices, to stand up for my community, to make sure that within my community, we're also standing up for, the genocide going on in Palestine and the fights going on in Colombia, lend your voice where you can, but then also being boundaried so that my cup is still full, to keep helping others. Because I feel like nowadays there's always something to care about, and it can get incredibly exhausting, to keep going.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned a great point, to make sure, like, when you're giving of yourself, to also make sure that your cup is still full. And I think that with women, we're givers. Um, I think I read a post that
Yeah.
said, you know what, I say yes even when I should say no. Whether that's applying yourself or someone
Mm-hmm.
asking you for a favor, and it's okay to say no. And I think that when we say no, it's freeing. Like, I said no. You're taking a stand, so that's super.
Yeah.
That's important. And then
Mm-hmm.
we have seen, not only in Hollywood, but even our day-to-day society, that non-white female voices we've come to the light, as far as taking a stand in these different movements and these protests. But what do you think that women can do to empower each other, to uplift, encourage, and inspire?
Mm-hmm. Man, I think we're so trained from birth to always put everyone else first, but then to compete with each other. and to think that there's only one seat at the table. And I think, you know, deprogramming from internalized misogyny starts with genuinely celebrating and supporting other women and getting into a mindset that there's enough for everyone. And what's good for one woman is good for me. And uplifting each other. And I try to, you know, catch myself in my own internalized misogyny biases where I feel, you know, that ingrained sense of like either competition or judgment happening subconsciously, to try to catch myself and really start to let all of that garbage go. So I think we can just support other women, uplift their voices, support their art, put our money where our mouth is, like buy female filmmaker films, buy female like driven books, support female owned businesses. And because we live in a capitalist society, so sometimes like our voice and our dollar is all we can use to vote for those things.
Yeah, it's hard out here. You know, it's hard out here. But to see that another woman like supports, it's like girl power, you know, in a
Yeah.
sense. And to see someone like just share or retweet, and it doesn't take much. It might not necessarily be money, but it does not take much. And so, um, as we continue on, you're also an artist as far as music. So, do you have any new music, and how have how has your music come from any life experiences, like, as far as writing and expressing yourself? Have any life experiences helped create, you know, songs that you have created? And what message are you trying to present to your audience with these songs?
Um, well, I do have new music coming out. It's really fun. We just did the first single, Wanted Woman, the music video, which was predominantly a female set. It's directed by Maggie Levin. She's like one of my favorite creative collaborators. The cinematographer is Autumn Bowie, who's a longtime creative collaborator of mine. So we're like getting the album in place. But I actually started in comedy music as a teenager. So I would do stand up, and half of my set would be like playing acoustic guitar and singing a comedic song. And I always found real music to be very vulnerable and like way scarier to me than stand up. Because with stand up, you get instant feedback if you're funny or not. You know where you stand with the audience. And with music, I was like, but everyone's just quiet and looking at you. How do you gauge if like they enjoy this? How do you know what the energy of the room is? And
Right.
I was always so scared of regular music that wasn't comedic. But honestly, it was a relief to go into music because I've made a YouTube video a week for like 13 years. So I feel like everything that's ever happened in my life, I've made a video about it. I often joke I have no opinions left that aren't on the internet. But when I started doing music seriously, all of my life experience was up for grabs again, because I could express these things that I had gone through in a totally different medium. So my music is often very inspired by like themes of empowered female friendships, because I have such a wonderful tribe and community of women around me. Suicide in particular, I lost my younger sister that way, and that's been a very influential factor in my life and who I am and what I stand for. As well as I think every cliche musician theme of love and losing love and feeling heartbroken and also wanting revenge in the form of living your best life. And so I hope with my music, other women just kind of feel seen or can relate to it. Because I know when I listen to a song and it just hits a core part of me that I feel like I can't articulate, it's the best feeling.
And that's important. You create vibes when you do that. You create, and you also you become relatable and authentic, especially when you have experiences that you're able to be free about. You know, I feel like music is so freeing, especially when you find a song that kind of relates to whatever you've been experiencing, that heartbreak. It's like, oh, let me turn this up.
Yeah. Let me play this on repeat and cry. Yeah.
Right. Right. And so we did hear about your passion, which is, you know, mental health awareness. And I believe that May is the month. May is the month that we really zero in on mental health. That's important. And I feel like it is so crucial that we focus in on who we are, what we're feeling, not only in our, you know, in our heads, but also in our hearts too. And I want to ask you, why do you think so many people suffer in silence? And what are the steps to really getting help when you are feeling like life is too much? It's too
Yeah.
much to handle.
Well, I think like there's such a stigma against mental health. I think our generation is the first generation that's like openly embracing saying like my therapist says, you know, we have like the Instagram memes, like we have holistic psychologists, we have millennial therapists. Like we are the first generation, I think, that's actively looking at generational trauma, about what wholeness really means, about placing mental wellness above all. And I think that most people suffer in silence because as much as we like to tout online, like I'm here for you if you need anything, when what we actually see is society making fun of mentally ill people. Like, you know, when Amanda Bynes very famously had a manic episode, everyone was quick to be like, she's crazy. Oh my God, like look at this person, you know, making a fool of herself, when she clearly had all the signs of kind of having a mental breakdown. And I think, you know, the more that we become conscious of it, like even now, did you see that Courtney Stodden article that came out that kind of analyzed how society turned on her when she was 16? She was married off to a man who was 50.
Oh,
And, you know, you have that, you have the Britney Spears documentary coming out, like society realizing how much we have targeted like young women and abused them in our culture. And so I feel like now we're just finally getting to the point where when we witness this behavior online, we're actually starting to feel compassion for it instead of immediately villainizing and demonizing actual victims online. So I think the way that our culture has typically treated victims has been a huge reason people are silent, because also we like to say, oh, you want to kill yourself? Clearly you're just seeking attention. Like, go do it then. Like, if you're actually going to do it, go do it. Whereas someone talking about committing suicide, if they have a plan, is a huge deterrent for them actually doing it. We should actually normalize conversations when people want to commit suicide. A lot of the research shows that it's the people who suffer in silence and never say anything who are more likely to go through with it. So I try to very actively talk about, you know, my depressive periods, when I've wanted to commit suicide. Asian American women are the second highest demographic to commit suicide, especially when you're like college aged. And if you've had someone in your immediate family commit suicide, you're at 50% more likely to do it yourself. And so I have all the statistics in my head. And so I try to be a person who's actually speaking about it so that other people also can be comfortable enough to say, oh, I have thought about that too, or this is how close I've come to it, or this is how I think I would do it if I wanted to do it. So that the more that they talk about it, the less and less likely it statistically becomes.
and I think that's very much so true. I said to myself, I said, many of us have been wearing a mask without wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And it's so sad that we have to learn how sometimes, like Future said, mask off. We have to take it off, and we have to be our authentic. So if we're hurting, we have to say, I'm hurting, I need help. And we have to realize that some people won't do that, but it's okay to offer a hug or a kind word or a text message. It does not take much to tell someone, I love you, I care about you, you're important, I appreciate you. Things like that really, really make the difference. And I think that we have to continue on and uplift each other.
Absolutely.
We really, really do. And so I want to ask you, have you ever struggled with identity? With identity?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a mutt. I am, you know, Japanese, Hawaiian, Filipino, and then a bunch of other white stuff. I grew up both in the South as a child and then Japan, and so I have a very bicultural sense of identity where you know, I'm not American enough in America. I wasn't Japanese enough in Japan, and I've struggled with that for like a really long time. I'm also bisexual, and coming to terms with my own internalized homophobia took me like decades. But now I feel very proud of everything that I am, and very unique. And that I'm informed by how many different cultures that I have, and very lucky to be a part of so many different cultures. But I think identity is something that we're always going to struggle with. I envy people like Dolly Parton, who were just born and they know who they are and they embody who they are unapologetically their entire freaking lives. Whereas I feel like I'm constantly trying to come to terms with who I am and how I'm changing and what that means. And I'm a Pisces moon, so I just have so many freaking feelings. But yeah, I think identity is a really hard thing, especially in America, when you're not white.
Yeah, and I think we're always supposed to be changing. We're always supposed to be evolving into our best self. So that is important to me. to always change, to always know that I have some more layers to myself that I'm peeling back.
Yeah.
So what? I'm not even my full self yet. So that's important to me. That's very important. And so for my last question, what's next for your career?
Oh man. I mean, I'm going to Boston to shoot a film next month. So acting is finally starting to open back up. I just sold a show to a streamer, which is in lawyer land. So I'll also be writing that pilot pretty soon, and just writing and acting, and hopefully putting forth stories in the world that humanize and sympathize POC women, and that can like make a change, because everything we consume as in media influences our beliefs. And so I'm really happy to contribute to the conversation, stuff that is hopefully going to help eradicate racism.
Thank you so much. And you're taking a stand, and that's important for you to do, and to encourage other people to, take a stand for racism, civil unrest, all of those things in our world that have been silenced and they're coming to surface now. It's
Yeah.
important for you and for me to say, you know what, it's time for us to get a part of this movement, and we have to make a difference, because here we are, we're on the front lines with this thing. And so I thank you so much. I wish you much success in the future, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really nice to meet you, Hannah.